Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm not giving it a name just yet because I'm not quite sure what this is now, except a narration of the ways that I am learning through life. Today, I want to talk to you about the idea of becoming a bitch. 15 years ago, when I left the man I then believed to be the love of my life, despite the sadness, I found myself excited about being single for the first time ever. And 2 years into that version of my reality, I was enamored with it. Everything about it. I got out of bed when I wanted and wandered into the kitchen to make coffee. I ignored dirty dishes and spent all day in my pajamas, writing or reading or researching. I dressed myself in shorts over tights with long socks and hiking boots and a grandma-style cardigan just because I could, and I liked the way it looked. I said yes or no to men who wanted to take me out based on whether or not I felt like getting dressed up. I went on vacation and lived with wild abandon in the jungles of possibility offered by new people in new places that I would never see again. In a phrase, blissful freedom. Whether to legitimize my new desire to remain single forever, or in a thinly veiled effort to avoid hurting myself again, I ran around my life gathering up research, like actual scientific documentation, personal experience, and ancient spiritual practices to lend credibility to my new perspective that loving myself alone was the key to deepening my spirituality and personal growth. And I'm not going to say that I was wrong. There's a reason some cultures ask their youth to go sit on a mountain alone for 3 days and 3 nights as a rite of passage into adulthood. There's a reason that countless stories are built around the plot line of a hero or heroine leaving their homeland or families to go on a quest in which they end up discovering themselves. Even modern mental health and other fields of study are touting the value of living alone. It was certainly true in my life, and I quickly began to see the incredible ways in which I was growing. It felt completely different to reach the top of a mountain, totally alone. Well, except for Rumi. I felt so empowered, enjoying a whiskey on the patio outside my favorite local bar on a Friday night, conversating with whomever happened to sit next to me. Driving through an hours-long blizzard in order to go on a ski vacation at a bucket list mountain was no longer something I felt I needed a friend or boyfriend to do. I discovered I easily made friends on the mountain, or in the hostel. If I had to sleep in a bus station in order to make the trip of my dreams happen, I did so. Being single opened doors to the way that I understood myself that would never have been cracked had I perpetually remained in relationships. For the first time, I felt powerful, independent, beautiful even, in my own skin, out in the world, dressed however I wanted to be and without the praise of a stranger. I no longer felt like an ugly failure of a woman if I took a shine to a man that didn't reciprocate those feelings. I felt like I had a personal perspective that could be a foundation for a professional one, that it was worth sharing. Ultimately, I became so enamored with my singleness that I carried the title like a banner, proudly waving over my shoulder. I didn't need men. I could have them whenever I wanted them, but I was doing damn fine on my own, thank you very much. When my most recent relationship collapsed, I gleefully dusted off my old single flag and wrapped it around me, comforted as though it were the embrace of an old dear friend. I was thrilled to go back to living my life with the freedom of single. For months, I wallowed in its bliss like an elephant in a mud hole. I was free, and it felt incredible. For a while. As 3 months turned into 4, and then 5, and then 6, I noticed some significant fraying on the edges of my single flag. To be expected, of course. None of us are meant to live in total isolation, and outside of the 4 words I spoke to the doorman several times a day, I was doing exactly that. Initially, I dove ever deeper into my inner world, taking stock of where I could learn and grow and reinforce my definitions of self. As my flag wore thinner, though, I came to understand that this kind of solitary spiritual and personal work could only take me so far. I could revise and redefine and refine my definition and experience of myself, my energy, my spirituality, but I couldn't make much significant progress in those categories in the context of relationships, in the expression of myself, which really is everything. The value of my perspective shrinks to 0 if there's no ear listening. My ability to feel confident in myself means nothing if I never leave the house and learn what it's like to feel confident in the world. We need people, circumstances, situations outside of us to help solidify our understanding and definitions of ourselves. All of them help to give shape to that most important of all relationships, our relationship to ourselves. There is no strength if there is no weight to be lifted, no immovable wall to be pressed against. In order to carry this newly minted, empowered woman version of myself out into the world, I had to be willing to invest myself in a relationship. My reality, my personal growth and spirituality, perhaps obviously, had become decidedly one-dimensional. I had begun hiding in my single status, theoretically protecting myself from hurt or rejection by rejecting the potential impact of the inherent pressures of another person in my life. My singlehood was becoming toxic, and, coupled with the aforementioned truths about the stagnation of my personal growth, it became a massive personal growth target. I took aim at my isolation with the intention to destroy it. My chosen weapon? Tinder. Almost immediately I was disillusioned. The first guy with whom I matched said hi, and then, I'm a few blocks away. I hope you enjoy the restaurant scene around here. I honestly didn't know how to respond. Clothed in my comfiest and ugliest pajamas with dirty hair and coffee breath, I scrambled to deflect any forthcoming proposals that we spend time together ahorita, like now. Nice, I responded, followed by, just so you know, I'm not available tonight. I'm just hoping to get to know some people here. I don't understand, he wrote back. You want to get to know people, but you're not available? Forgive me, sorry. I'm new to the area and to the app. I just didn't know what you were expecting, and I'm not available right now. Gratefully, he blocked me before I could further fumble the interaction. The next guy, Ron, messaged me politely for a few days before he finally asked me out for coffee. We met in the vendor's square in front of my neighborhood grocery store and walked toward a coffee shop. A couple blocks in, he stopped and looked at me. Do you want to get a drink instead? Yes, absolutely I wanted to get a drink. He was cute and so polite, and I felt surprisingly comfortable, but I was certainly not going to reject a little social lubrication. 4 hours, 3 beers, for him, 2 for me, and a plate of appetizers later, we'd actually gotten to know each other a little bit. I liked him, but there weren't any fireworks. He seemed a little shy, perhaps a tiny bit fearful even, of the great big world out there. He offered to take me home as dusk turned to night, and when he put his car in park and killed the engine in front of my building, I turned in my seat to face him. He told me several times how much fun he had and that he hoped we could do it again sometime, and I agreed and squirmed in my seat. It didn't seem like he was going in for the kiss, and Rumi was upstairs trying not to pee on my wood floors. I don't know how long you're supposed to sit in a car and chat before it's appropriate to excuse yourself. I'm sure it's wildly flexible rule anyway. So rather than wait for an awkward moment that I wouldn't know what to do with anyway, I rushed in for a car seat side hug, gave him the traditional Latin American kiss on the cheek, and escaped into the lobby of my building. Lying in bed that night, I got a match from a beautiful man that truly sparked more interest with his photos than what I'd felt from Ron all night. Random sidebar here. I feel obligated to confess that I, as expected, discovered the error in several poorly founded assumptions I'd initially made about dating apps. One of which is that you can't really get to know a person from a few photos. In truth, you can get a lot more information than I thought. The bodybuilder guy whose photos are exclusively of him in the gym, shirtless on a beach, in the mirror in the locker room, almost always with face hidden by the camera. Or the I travel a lot guys who showcase not 1 or 2 but loads of photos of them in front of various landmarks. The I have a nice car guys, you get my point. Anyway, the notification from Lad lit up my phone as I was scrolling through his photos. Lad with a snowboard, walking over an ancient stone bridge in Europe, I assume. Just his beautiful face smiling at the camera. Hello, Jacqueline. Please note, he used my name, not some moniker based solely on my attractiveness, and followed it with a smiley face. What's up? Hello, lad, I responded, smiley face. I'm just lounging. How are you? Good. It's my last night in Colombia, relaxing in the hotel and thinking of going out to have a drink. Oh, what a shame you're leaving Colombia, I wrote back. Please note my mastery of the fine art of flirting, because that's actually what I was going for. Totally, he said. Did you like it? I queried in an effort to keep the conversation going. I liked it so much that I'm thinking about moving here for a year. I love your photos, by the way. You're very pretty. Thank you, I responded. You're so kind and quite handsome yourself. We're really close. Would you be interested in going for a drink in your neighborhood? Sorry, I can't tonight, I responded, thinking about how annoying it would be to get dressed again, the fact that I'd already had 2 beers tonight, and with memories of my first match rushing back. Lad, however, in a refreshingly unexpected maneuver, continued to message me. We chatted for the next half hour, and I learned he was here in Bogota on business. He also loved motorcycles and traveling, worked in geology, and this was his last night in the country before he flew home to Spain. Spain! The second of the 2 countries I think I'd like to settle down in someday. Ugh. The thing is, though, despite my disenchantment with the results in a romantic context, Tinder is teaching me something. Or rather, I'm learning from the experiences that the app is helping me to create. I felt such a sense of embarrassment with the first match. The idea that I'd said, or written rather, something that was so juvenile or inappropriate or whatever that I was instantly rejected and subsequently ignored. But it passed, and much more quickly than it would have a few years ago when I was first dipping my toes in the waters of the dating pool. With Ron, I learned how comfortable I could be in myself, in the way I showed myself to the world. Of course, it helped that I wasn't especially interested in him, but I was just wholly and wildly myself, no matter how much I thought something I was about to say would, quote, put him off. And when it didn't, in fact, put him off, I accepted his appreciation of me as an interesting person, someone he liked spending time with, without brushing off the compliments or downplaying my own value to him. Lad gave me a sense of how I really want to feel in the blossoming stages of a relationship, no matter how short or long it may be. I felt his desire to see me for who I am, to connect with that. But perhaps the interaction that most succinctly narrates my growth and evolution in this context of my life is that which I had with a fellow we'll call Dom. His messages started out flirtatious and aggressive, which is to be expected with Tinder. I mean, I think so. That's what I've heard. I'm still learning. And I responded in kind for the same reasons I was jazzed about Lad. This guy worked in alternative energy, taught at a prestigious U.S. university in one of my favorite East Coast cities, and was gorgeous. Until, only a few messages into the conversation, his playful flirtatiousness transitioned to a more aggressive, I like to dominate my partners kind of interaction, to which I responded assertively and with not a trace of concern for how he might react. Yeah, this isn't going to work. I am fiercely independent and I don't take instruction well. It felt wonderful to just draw this boundary in a way that didn't make him wrong, that didn't shame him for liking what he liked, but rather that I could stand fiercely in my power and assert what was and wasn't going to work for me. Nothing more, nothing less. No shame. That reaction in and of itself isn't new. I learned how to draw boundaries in my first iteration of getting to know single Jackie. What felt very different was my utter lack of concern for his emotions, his response. Years ago, I would have put a ridiculous amount of effort into making sure that he still felt celebrated. Something like, I'm not the right person for you, but please remember how wonderful you are. I'd play down my own value or appreciable qualities to soften the blow of rejection and to be sure they understood that I in no way believed I was particularly awesome. I'm not that great anyway, you'll be better off with someone else, kind of thing. I strove so hard for humility that I drifted over the line into meekness, and not in a good way. As evidenced by my experience with the lawyer. We met virtually as he tried to help me manage all the visa bullshit that's required to stay legally in this country for more than 6 months. He cleverly ascertained whether or not I had a boyfriend in the first 5 minutes of our first conversation, but he was nice, polite, respectful. Throughout our months of working together, he would regularly suggest that we should see each other socially once all this was over, but he never actually asked me out. He gave me a FaceTime tour of his house, pointing out the outdoor bar where we could have a couple beers together after the hike we'd go on. He told me in several messages that he didn't have plans for the coming weekend, or that we should hang out sometime. I always responded politely. I even gave him days and times when I thought I'd be free, because, it's almost always worth at least meeting someone, right? Except that he never pulled the trigger, even after my visa was granted. He suggested twice more that we spend time together. Both times I returned carefully crafted responses, exhibiting confidence but not too much, suggesting that I was interested in spending time together socially without coming off as eager, because I wasn't, even offering vague indications of when I'd be available. In short, that I was a nice, polite girl and that I wasn't flat out rejecting him. But then radio silence. Days later, in our next communication, he'd ask why I hadn't gotten a hold of him. I couldn't quite get my head around it. Clearly he wanted to spend time together. Obviously he understood the basics of creating a plan. Why would he act so hurt that I didn't reach out? Especially when he said, we'll be in touch, after I suggested a time frame that would work for me. Sure, it would have been nice to meet up with him, but I wasn't lit up by our interactions. And if he suggested we hang out and then didn't get a hold of me, that just meant that I wasn't going to have to shower and put public appropriate clothes on. A win in my book. Still, it felt like it hurt him to some degree, and I don't love that. But I also don't feel like I have to take care of those feelings anymore. I don't really feel like I have to do anything, actually. In part because the only reason I've come up with for why he would suggest hanging out, respond to my agreement with the idea, and then completely cease communication, is that he wants me to be the one to ask for the date. Which bothers me for some reason. It feels a little like some version of a power struggle, like he wants to know that I'm really anxious to spend time with him. Except that I'm not. And instead of leaving it at that, which I would completely understand and prefer, if I'm honest, he continues to message me to suggest we hang out and then later shares his disappointment that it didn't happen. Twice I've responded by telling him that I was expecting him to get a hold of me because that's what he said he was going to do. I find it so painful to know or even think that I've hurt or might hurt someone's feelings, an attribute that in and of itself is normal, human. But it can become dangerous, at least in my view, when I work so hard to avoid it that I don't tell the hard truth, my hard truth, the please stop messaging me version. Except that now, 2 weeks of Tinder has brought this old behavior pattern sharply back into focus, ripe for change. In the past, when I wasn't really interested in someone, I worked so hard not to be seen as a bitch that I didn't really get the message across. And on the rare occasion that I was truly interested in someone, I was so afraid of being rejected, or worse, abandoned after a short relationship, that I abandoned myself, my own needs and boundaries. Or I rejected their affection and attention out of hand, unconsciously, of course. Yes, I wanted their time and their touch, but I would tell myself that those efforts were not gestures of love, or I would bat away compliments as though they were pesky flies befouling a dinner party. This version of putting myself out there has helped me to practice, literally, accepting accolades with grace, drawing firm boundaries around who I am and what I want, and honoring that with unshakable devotion, even if it hurts someone else. Not that I would ever set out without intention, of course, but sometimes the truth is brutal. I can deliver it with kindness, yes, but I am learning to just have the difficult conversation. It isn't helping anyone for me to toe around the reality that I'm not interested, try to be a friend to someone that I don't actually have any desire to spend much time with. In fact, there's an argument to be made that in that effort, I've actually been stringing the other person along. Perhaps adopting a new, firmer voice in my interactions with men, with anyone really, will end up being the kinder approach. Perhaps in embracing a bit of bitchiness, I will avoid being an actual bitch. I don't want to soothe Dom's wounded pride by making up reasons why it won't work to hang out. I don't want to have to feed the lawyer's ego, make him think that I adore him and can't wait to nail down plans to hang out. Fuck that. I want to feel adored by me. It's taken me decades to even begin to believe that maybe I'm good enough to be adored by me. And if that's offensive or bitchy or selfish, so be it. In this life, I'm going for marriage to myself. A marriage of the fierce independence and freedom of my single self and the kind, nurturing, emotionally supportive, and even ego-stroking girlfriend self. If it's the right guy and for the right reasons, that's exactly the kind of person I want to be. But until those conditions are met, I'm going to stop trying so hard to anticipate and take care of the feelings of the not right guys. Until then, I'm going to be single, seeking self. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please remember to subscribe and consider joining us on Patreon, where you'll get deeper, more spiritually oriented insights on these different experiences. And if you'd like to do any kind of self-work or deep healing yourself, I've got lots of resources on my website, www.authorjacquelineLenae.com. Have a great week.